collaborating to bring these transformative ideas to wider communities. Please welcome Simón Silva.
All right, buenos dias. Good morning. I was falling asleep over there because the wind hit me just right. And kind of reminded me of working out the fields, which was a good thing in some ways. So it's good to be back in the valley. And especially before the summertime. So it's a good thing that it's nice, we have a beautiful day. So I am going to be speaking for approximately 45 minutes, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions with my brain. Probably about 10 minutes, give and take. I'll see if I can run through this information a little bit quicker, because I love to be challenged. I love to be, I love to learn from the questions that are asked from the audience. So I definitely want to give you as much time as possible. So first of all, I want to thank Dr. Alfaro and Dr. Maldonado for inviting me to be your keynote speaker this morning. So thank you very much. Hopefully I won't disappoint. The title of my presentation, I'm going all in on this thing, which is basically, I'm saying that art is definitely the subject of change, and I'm definitely going to do the best that I can in order for me to convince you that it is, so putting all my eggs in one basket this morning. Enhancing the human potential through the arts, and I added culture in there because I think the culture component is going to be seriously important, especially for us as Latinos. Now, I know the arts are definitely the answer to the changes that we're looking for in our education system, as well as our professional and personal lives. I know that for a fact, and I'm going to share my own personal story a little bit more in depth to kind of prove that, because I think that I'm a good example of that. Before I get into that, I do want to share this with you. I think that there's not a follow-through. There's been a tremendous drop in students reaching out to me, or individuals, teachers, professionals reaching out, just to kind of pick my brain, ask information, ask me questions. I made that a habit. At 65, I learned that success in life is all about exchanging bad habits for good habits. In this case, one of the good habits that I do have is that I reach out to people whose lives and whose work I admire. In this case, the amazing Isabel Allende. I saw this amazing TED Talk that she gave called How to Live Passionately No Matter Your Age. Ladies, she talks about her fantasy spreading chocolate on the younger version of Antonio Banderas. You might be interested in that part. I just emailed her just a thank you. I mean, I guarantee you that you'll have a blast just watching that video. It's an amazing video. She's an amazing speaker. She's brilliant. She's funny. And I learned a lot. So I just emailed her. And I said, hey, Isabel, you don't know me, but I just wanted to thank you for the TED Talk that you gave. She actually responded 3 days after I emailed her. She asked me for my home address. She knew my work. I was surprised. I was shocked. She asked me for my home address. I thought she was trying to break into my house. Yeah, imagine that, right? But she wasn't. She actually, 3 days later, or several days later, she ended up sending my wife and I an autographed copy of her book. Now, who does that, right? This lady does. And so I was completely amazed. Not that I'm saying that people are going to give you anything for free, right? But I think just the information that you could get from these professionals that have a tremendous career is worth its weight in gold. So please make that a habit in your life, for sure. I like sharing newfound quotes, and this one is attributed to Booker T. Washington. He said, success is not measured as much by what we accomplish as by what we overcome in order to accomplish it. And I'm sure that many of us in this room have overcome a lot. And that, again, is worth its weight in gold, for sure. Now, I know that every culture has aspects of amazing uniqueness. And so for Latinos, we have a lot of very unique things. And again, culture is going to be, in the 21st century, a big part of our success. I guarantee you. So for us as Latinos, we've never really kind of dwelled on the idea of whether or not the glass is half full or half empty. We don't care. You know what we do care about, right? As unique Latinos, is what's inside these glasses, right? Preferably some good mezcal or some tequila. I prefer the mezcal. That's a good thing. Now that we're in the age of artificial intelligence, What skills will make our students valuable in an artificial intelligence-driven world? I was watching some videos this morning as I was killing some time as my wife was taking a shower so we could leave. And my son, who's working for Meta, he's telling us that about 83% of what's on the internet that has any kind of information is basically fake. And so finding the truth in the 21st century is going to get more and more difficult to find. And that's going to be a big, big issue. Because like Dr. Herrera said, he said that truth is expensive to find in the days that we're living in. Time, money, effort. So what kind of skills do our students need? Well, I think they're going to definitely need creativity, emotional intelligence, critical thinking, and ethical reasoning. Going back to what Dr. Alfaro mentioned earlier. Now, I also want to be sure that I remind all of you that all of our students, not just some, all of our students are incredibly creative, incredibly intelligent, and incredibly unique, unless they have some sort of hardcore learning disability. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because when I was in school, eventually by the time I got to high school, my cholo friends and I, not that I was a cholo, but they were, or they thought they were, we had all come to a conclusion that all of those students that would raise their hands every time the teacher would ask a question, that group of students was miles ahead of us in terms of intelligence. And we bought into that lie, because that's what it was. It was a lie. The problem is that many of our students and many of us grew up in environments that were simply not conducive to our personal growth and learning. Now, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, watching my dad beat up my mom, how is that going to play into my life and my needs or my wants to be a 4.9 student? So whatever it is these days that everybody shooting for. Fact is that all of our students are incredibly intelligent and we need to remind ourselves that. But we have to also identify what intelligence is. Because I got to tell you that a lot of people are still stuck in this idea that intelligence is about GPA, test taking, and memorization. If that's what intelligence is, then I don't want it. I don't want any of it. As a matter of fact, if that's education, I don't want it either, right? Because I don't think that's what intelligence is all about. I think intelligence is basically collecting information, which we do organically, because that's how brilliant all of us are, where some of us are unaware of that. It's also processing that information that we collect, and thirdly, applying that information in a way that only I can, or in a way that only you can. That to me is what I think intelligence is all about. However, the problem is that we're currently stuck in the processing information. Scientists don't know how long it takes from short-term memory to go to long-term memory, and that is something that is seriously, seriously wrong with a lot of our students and their education. Problem is that we're addicted to being entertained and distracted, including myself. Well, the good thing with me is that I disconnect, right? As I go into the studio to write or to paint, I disconnect for several hours. So that's a good thing. So I have that part of it. Unfortunately, if we're not able to process all the information that we're currently being bombarded with in a positive way, deeply and profoundly, the best time for me when I get up in the morning is to go into the backyard, and you can ask my wife this. Best time of my day, going to the backyard, picking up dog poop and dry leaves. Because I'm completely disconnected and my mind goes into all of these different avenues, asking myself some very profound, some very personal questions without any kind of technology to help me out. That's me in the morning. I also want to introduce you to a gentleman by the name of George Land. George Land was hired by NASA to create a creativity test because NASA wanted to hire not only the most intelligent, but also the most creative. And of course, this creativity test that George Land created magically, and eventually NASA became NASA. Now, George Land, being a curious gentleman, he decided what would happen is if he gave this creativity test to a group of 1,600 kids between the ages of 3 and 5. And as you can see, they had scored at 98% creative genius. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about what that means, or at least what I think it means. But as you can tell, he still began giving the same test to the 1,600 kids all the way up to the age of approximately 31 years old. And at 31, they were down to 2%. Now, if George Glenn was still around, my question to him would be, at what point are we in the negatives? At 40? I mean, at 50? At 60? Are we at minus 80? It's a serious offense, right? Now, I have reason to believe that this is true. You can look it up if you don't believe me. But what would happen if we were able to preserve and protect and enhance even 50% of everyone's creativity, individuality, and curiosity? I guarantee you that our society would not be in the mess that we're in, with the crazies on the right and the crazies on the left, and the truth being somewhere in the middle. And no one wants to even go there or look there, or very few, I should say. Most AI experts that I've read, that I've listened to, they all agree that we will have to nurture what we've lost. Many of us have lost our human intelligence and embrace the continuous change that needs to happen in our education, all of our education. Now, I wrote this book about a year ago called The Power of the Mujer, and I brought some copies in the back. There's only 2 in Spanish if you want the Spanish versions. But I wrote this book because I ended up watching, my wife and I actually binge watched on Netflix. We watched a series called Street Food Latin America, because we're addicted to tacos. But they did an episode of Oaxaca, and we're addicted to Oaxaca. One of the segments there, they basically kind of focus on Doña Vale along with other women, but this is me. I was starstruck meeting Doña Vale a couple of years ago. I bought her that blouse. I wish I could have given her all my money, because she deserves it. Because I was meeting this rock star, you know, and I really mean that in all honesty. In meeting Doña Vale, I realized that after reading and listening to all these AI experts, she actually was able to exemplify the perfect combination of everything they were asking for, right? Leveraging her human intelligence and drawing from her life experiences, which has led her to remarkable success in life. And I'm not going to read all of these, but basically, as you can see, it's an amazing list. And she was able to do this without any kind of formal education, which is super amazing within itself as well. I do believe that we're focusing way too much on people with a lot of education. I mean, they deserve the praise, absolutely. Don't get me wrong. But I think the future and our competitive advantage are to be found elsewhere. You know where? In the past. The things that we've overcome. Lessons that we've learned. The future and our competitive advantage is to be found in our stories. Everyone's story is important. Everyone's story needs to be told and listened to. And I didn't believe that to be true. So I did this series of paintings of, maids. It's also going to be found in our resilience. Latinos, they're not afraid to work. At least most of them are not. It's also going to be found in our struggles, in our past, and in our hopes, and in our dreams. Our future is in the past and the present, and yes, in the future as well. So I want to share a little bit about Simón Silva, because I think that Simón Silva is definitely a good example of the way that the arts are capable of change, continuous change, and creating lifelong learners. Not making me a better artist in terms of my abilities as a painter, but simply as a lifelong learner. So I want to share that. You've heard already that I was born in Mexicali, just across the fence here. I was brought here to the U.S. by my parents when I was a year and a half. This is what I look like. My nickname back then was El Frijolito. I don't know why. Maybe too much gas, I don't know. I was good looking, then I got old, right? You can laugh. It'll happen to all of us, the best of us. I would have to explain to people when I travel around the country exactly where I come from, because they think it's San Diego. It's always San Diego, right? No, it's the Imperial Valley. Hopeville, to be exact, on the west side, which typically is the better side of town. In this case, it was not. This is the barrio. This is the humble entrance to my house, built in the 1930s. It was a house with 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. For 13 people, all I can say is there was 2 or 3 people in the bathroom at the same time. We did whatever it took to survive, including the hot summers and cold winters. This is a piece that I did called Un Día de Invierno. And as you can tell, this is how we lived. This is how we slept. If I got up in the middle of the night or went to a party with some friends, I would come back. We had a small heater, small air conditioner. That's all we could afford. And if I came back, it was dark in there, kind of dark. And so I was stepping on a couple of heads, a couple of bodies. Did whatever it took to survive. Back in 1979, my parents, I was already thoroughly embarrassed at my house and the fact that we were broke, that we were poor. They went to Santo Tomas and they bought these 5-gallon containers of these bright lemon yellow paint. And as a high school senior, they painted our house a bright lemon yellow. This is before people went crazy, right? Even white people, they were painting all kinds of different colors. You can see 2 things from outer space, my bright lemon yellow house and the Great Wall of China. I think the CIA was onto us, I think. Unfortunately, I also, like I said earlier, I grew up in a household where there was a lot of domestic violence, there was a lot of child abuse. It was not a good place to live. But I will say something to that in a minute. Now, as far as health is concerned, they took us across the border for a shot or some pills. In Hopeville, we did have a doctor. His name was Dr. LaChance, which was lovingly changed to Dr. Last Chance. He did house calls. Hey, who does that, right? Who did that, right? He did. But unfortunately, most of the time when we got sick, right, our parents would just bring out the big guns, which was Vicks Vapor Rub, which we used for everything. Birth control, headaches, we've kept this company alive. Dr. Alfaro, we need to look for scholarships for this company, for our students. I think there's something there. Unfortunately, things got worse. I became what is called a migrant student, for those of you who don't know what that is. Basically, I was pulled out of school early. We came back about a month and a half late. I always felt like I was playing catch-up to everybody else as we traveled up and down the state of California, as far north as Oregon, Washington State. My father loved Washington State because Washington State, in the summertime, the sun does not set completely till about 10:30 at night. You know what that means, right? He would literally work us till 5:30, 6:30, 7:30 at night, and we still had 3 hours of sunlight. And he loved that. And he abused that. He abused that a lot. Here I am with my mom picking strawberries. Probably the job that I like the most, but not really. And here I am with my parents in Modesto, with the duraznos, the frambuesas up in the top right corner, picking raspberries, and in the bottom, we're picking green beans in Salem. My brother has his shoes off. No, yes, he did have shoes. But in Salem, it would get 90 degrees with 90% humidity. So most of the time, we just kind of took our shoes off because it was more comfortable to work without our shoes. By the time I got to high school, unfortunately, my parents had not developed their abstract thinking skills. And unfortunately, that didn't work well for my brothers and sisters. What I mean by that is that if you think about education, we spend all this time and money and effort, and at the end of 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 years, they give you a nice ceremony with a piece of paper with your name on it. For some people, kind of bizarre. They don't understand that it's up here, right? It stays up here. So my parents decided that they were going to start taking out my brothers and sisters in junior high and high school. The same thing was going to happen to me. Luckily for me, I had some wonderful teachers and counselors, and they basically convinced me that the continuation of my education was going to be the thing to do, to change my life permanently for the better, right? Now again, I have to stop here and say something. Although my parents did a lot of bad things, a lot of wrong things, I now understand how difficult it is to be a parent, right? My kids think I'm crazy. But one of the things that my parents did get right, and I think this goes back to what Dr. Alfaro said, my parents gave us value-based learning that taught us to think for ourselves, especially when it came to respect, and responsibility, and honesty, and kindness, and integrity, and fairness, and courage, and accountability. They got that right. And isn't this what we need exactly right now in the world? without any kind of education, they got it right. This is what we need to go back to. Now, unfortunately, I was terrified of my dad. Here's my dad with one of his gallos. He was a gallero, a cockfighter. He had about 200 of these in the backyard. I absolutely hated these animals because he actually took better care of these animals than his own kids. I wanted to kill them. I really did. Unfortunately, my mom had to do my dirty work for me because that's how we do it in Latino households. She approached my dad about letting me go to college, and my father responded by trying to kick us out of the house. He told us a whole bunch of bad words that I'm not going to say, and he wanted to beat us up. Luckily for me, my mom didn't give up. The power of the mujer, right? Power of the mujer. My mom did not give up as she got together with my two tias from Brooklyn, and my father said he's glad that my tias were not men because they would be bank robbers. And they basically got together and forced my dad to let me go to college. I had no idea what I was doing. No idea. So I went to IBC. Great place to start. Well, my wife and I went to IBC. And unfortunately, we have this tremendous mess now with a lot of students not being able to pay off their student loans. And in the first place, they should have looked at community colleges. That's just my humble opinion, of course. After 2 years, I transferred to the world-famous Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California. No, this is not Richard Ramirez. This is what happens and what you look like when you have no money. You're trying to be cool, but you can't. I stayed there for 5 years. I cried, I screamed, I wanted to quit. Luckily, there always will, and always has been people who want to be part of a success story. And I'm sure all of you are part of that. And thank you, by the way. Unfortunately, I wanted to quit, but I think the best thing that kept me in the game was the fact that they reminded me that everything is temporary. Everything is temporary. And so that was enough to keep me going. So after 5 years at Art Center, gave my parents 6 months notice of my graduation. They did not show up. Why didn't they show up? That's a good question. I think simply they didn't show up because they were afraid and they were embarrassed. Because unfortunately, back then, and even in today's times, there's situations and places that some people are just not welcome. They're not. I mean, let's tell the truth here, right? I looked at myself in the mirror. I thought I was going to be rich and famous. Unfortunately, I looked at myself in the mirror and I found myself deficient in all of these areas. The worst thing for me was communication. And I can tell you that a big, drastic change happened. You know why? Because the arts came into my life in a correct way through this. Through this. The Chicano literature. I never read any of these. I didn't think Latinos could write. You have to understand that I was alive when the dinosaurs were around, right? No internet. And so for me to read these books and connect with the characters and identify the questions and the situations was beautiful. It was life-changing. And that's when it all happened. And I'm thoroughly convinced that many of us in this room began this incredible journey called education through learning through the arts, through the books, the paintings, the music, and we need to remember that. But we need to also understand what is art, because there's a lot of misconceptions as to what art truly is, especially the application for creating lifelong learners. Because I'm not talking about art for art's sake, I'm talking about art for education's sake. So what is that? What is that? What is art? Well, I can tell you that the arts are one of the few things that can give a sense of hope and importance to everyone on the planet. I can tell you that much. That's for sure, right? What else is art? Well, the arts are capable of nurturing our human potential, which is what I said in my title. And the arts are rarely considered to be one of the sources we've been looking for to enhance our human potential and for creating sustainable equity. Because that's what this is about, guys. This is about creating sustainable equity, not just for a year, not for 2 years, but for the entire lifetime of that person, of everybody. So again, not art for art's sake, but art for education's sake. Unfortunately, how many of us, to be honest, how many of us took an art class at the college or university level And we knew that it was going to be an easy A. Anybody want to raise your hands? I know my wife did. She told me so. Along with her friends, right? Unfortunately, the arts, even today in 2026, the arts are considered to be an elective, an afterthought, at the university level and at the elementary school level. It's not even considered to be a core subject, not even close. I like what Elliot Eisner said. He said that the arts enable us to have experiences we can have from no other source, and through such experiences to discover the range and variety of what we're capable of feeling. What is he saying here exactly? I like what he says, but I like what I said better, right? The arts can help us feel more, think more, grow more, and experience more. It's all about the experiences. Now, think about this like Alice in Wonderland, right? The rabbit hole. We don't know how far and how deep that hole goes. And that should excite us as lifelong learners. To be able to feel more intensely, to grow, and to have all of these experiences. This is still the best time to be alive. When we encounter those beautiful opportunities to grow and learn and to get the chills, right? Like the chills that I got by seeing the Juan Gabriel documentary, which is amazing, by the way. You know? Art and creativity can come in many different forms. A lot of people think that art is simply about something that matches your couches or your drapes. It is not that. We're all still artists, whether you believe it or not. Because art and creativity can come in many forms, like painting, drawing, questions, ideas, cooking, design, decorating, writing, dance, film, music, etc., etc., etc. Art and curiosity is a practice. A lot of people think, I want that. I want that in my life. I want that in my practice. I want that in my profession. And yet, they think that art and creativity happens from Monday through Friday. That's not how it works. It's kind of like feeding yourself, right? It's not Monday through Friday. It's, for me, Monday through Sunday, 5 times a day, if I can. Especially if there's good food around, right? It's a habit that needs to be practiced every single day. And we nurture it, enhance it through the practice. Again, what did I say earlier? Life is about exchanging bad habits for good habits, and we need to make that a habit in our lives. Unfortunately, our education system isn't set up to nurture our individuality, and I think that's a huge problem. And during the formative years of our lives, certain aspects of our uniqueness were gradually eroded. I'm married to a teacher. I know for a fact that the average teacher is only required to take one art class. I just asked a group of teachers in Santa Maria last week. 50% of them, no requirement of art classes. The other third, one. And there was 2 teachers with 2 classes, but I think they were like arts and crafts. Unfortunately, teachers do not receive enough training and understanding of how to apply the arts effectively in the most important years of our education, the early years. We enter an education system with a full tank of curiosity, but our education and learning becomes a competition. And to me, education should not be about a competition. It's damaging, right? And so what ends up happening? Well, my wife and I see across the country kids as young as kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade that are terrified to be creative. And that tank of curiosity, the one that organically refilled itself as we played outside with mud and worms and everything else that we found in the backyard, it basically kind of dries up or dies. We were all born creative geniuses. It's not a secret, guys. We were. I'll prove it to you. Going back to what George Land said, right? Creative geniuses. This is Rocco. He's 6 years old now, by the way. His father's losing his hair. He's got about 6 hairs on the back of his head. That's a portrait of his father. It looks exactly like him. Then he decides to do this amazing heart with 5 hearts inside the heart. Kids are visual geniuses in communication visually. Right? Who does this? Right? En español dicen que los borrachos y los niños dicen la verdad. ¿Será cierto? I don't know. I guess it depends how drunk the person is, right? Kids, however, I'm going to tell you the truth, right? So in this case, this young kindergartner, he draws this amazing crocodile. Have you ever spoken to somebody and they just talk and talk and talk and they never say anything? And then you start looking at your watch and thinking, did I turn off the frijoles? Kids don't do that, right? They're going to give you exactly what you need. And some people would look at this and say, well, yeah, but it's missing 2 legs. And if you ask this kid what happened, he's going to say, silly. They're on the other side, right? You just can't see them. And then there's a Tin Man by my son Francisco at age 6. Super unique. And Emilio at age 4, we know who this guy is. Oftentimes people come up to me, kind of like a doctor, right? And they say, what's the big deal with the whole art thing, right? Especially with kids. And I say, what's a big deal? Well, I'll tell you what the big deal. I guarantee you that in the past, present, and the future, you will never, ever, ever see another drawing like this. And what does that translate to? It translates to the fact that in the past, present, and the future, you will never, ever, ever, ever meet another kid like my kid. Or my other kids. Or like your kids. Or like all of you, right? That's the beautiful thing about this whole thing, right? And unfortunately, many of our teachers, because again, they lack training, they decide to do director drawing. Thank God for kids like this guy who did not pay attention. And didn't do a much better job with the teacher here. Now, it's not that I don't believe or support systematic learning. That's not what I'm about, okay? Unfortunately, the visual arts cannot be taught the same way as the other core subjects. And realism, unfortunately, should not be the end goal for the arts, by the way. I get the way we teach things, right? Systematically, 1 + 1 = 2, and eventually when the child grows up, he's going to be able to do complex mathematics. The problem with visual art is that realism is the end goal, and you're devolving their genius level abilities, and that's a serious crime. So uniqueness and individuality should be the end goal, not realism. If you want realism, take a photo. You're going to get bored. It's like eating McDonald's all around the world, same thing. But the uniqueness, now that cannot be taught. Simplicity can also come and become much more effective than realism as well, just like this student Emilio that I work with. Beautiful, beautiful simplicity, but again, it's not about the end product. It's about the concept and the idea and the thinking. Him and his sister went off to college, and obviously the education changed them, the beautiful application of color, and yet everybody that stayed behind stayed red. Again, much better and much more effective than realism. Many of our students and adults lack varied experiences. Now, why do I know this? Well, because I've done a little experiment with groups that I've been working with lately. I asked them to draw me an ear of corn. Everybody does the white or the yellow. Corn can be any color you want it to be, guys. Any color you want it to be. But I do the pumpkin as well, and of course they do the orange pumpkin. And we did a photo shoot in Ventura with our dogs. Can you imagine what would happen if a child drew a pumpkin like this? Brought it to class, I guarantee you the teacher would give them a big, fat, juicy F, right? We're lacking experiences. What are some example projects that we can do to continue protecting and enhancing our students' individuality and creativity? Well, I'm going to go through these real quick because I'm running out of time here. But we need to understand that a lot of our kids are missing experiences. I didn't go to the ocean in San Diego until I was in college. I didn't experience the snow until I went to college in Pasadena. So I don't mind systematic learning, but if you're going to draw a dog with your entire class, then take the opportunity to say, hey, what kind of dog do you have in your house? Where'd you get it? What does it do? What color is it? How big is it? And you start talking about the different types of dogs, right? We would leave our dog back in the house when we lived to Washington State. The neighbor would take care of it. But you need to ask him about whether or not you know, for example, Chihuahuas and, French Bulldogs and Collies. You need to give them that experience of understanding this stuff, that it exists. But even in choosing one of these guys, there's obviously going to be differences even within the breeds themselves. And eventually, all of the kids in your classroom should, in fact, be able to create a different type of dog. It's not about the systematic learning, it's about the choices that we're giving our kids to be able to think for themselves, right? And again, my wife, she texted me this photograph that a teacher gave her. She said, "What do you want me to do with this?" And I said, "Burn it." Well, no, you can't burn it. Just throw it in the trash. Give them a blank piece of paper that's going to create open-ended thinking, and it's going to be deeper creative development. So what she did, she gave them a piece of white paper, some crayons, and I said, "Watch the magic happen." And I have a whole pile of these at home that are worth millions of dollars in their uniqueness, in their beauty, right? And then we need to provide students with constructive feedback. Just like any other course subject, we need to put the stuff up on the wall and say, "Hey, let me tell you about this beautiful alien drawing that you did. It checks out all of these principles of design." Well, you don't have to tell them that, right? You can just kind of give them a professional critique, is what they deserve, for sure. Fear is always going to be present in our lives, whether we like it or not. Now, we can either be terrified and just kind of, just sit there in fear, or we can kind of deal with it and understand it and remind ourselves that everything we create, write, think about, or construct can and should be improved. I do these workshops with different age groups, and it always happens. They're so fixated on the end product, and I think a big part of our education system is fixated on the end product instead of the lessons learned along the way. And I see a lot of people, even a lot of adults, take that end product and throw it in the trash along with everything that they've learned. And that is a serious offense for everyone. Education is about continuous growth and change, or at least it should be, right? And I like what Professor Harari said. He says, individuals will have to know how to reinvent themselves several times during their lifetime. Bringing us back to Doña Vale. No formal education, and yet continuous evolution and change, creativity as a lifelong learner. So Doña Vale's creativity and individuality were protected and they were enhanced. So this is the list of the benefits of the arts. It's not about getting in front of people in power who are going to make decisions on whether or not to cut the art program, but to convince them that it's much more than just children learning or giving them an opportunity to express themselves. That's the least of importance. And as you can tell, there's a huge list of benefits of the arts that are applicable to every single profession out there. And can the arts help us protect and enhance a higher percentage of the creative genius in all of us? I believe it can. I believe the arts can provide transformation, sustainable equity for all, creativity and innovation, social-emotional learning, cultural preservation, critical thinking and interpretation, ethical and philosophical reflection, and enhances the quality of life. And the real question is, are we doing enough to protect and enhance our individuality, uniqueness, and creativity? Because I believe the arts are definitely the answer to the changes we're looking for in our education system as well as our professional and personal lives. The future of humanity needs pioneering to move forward, even if it means embracing uncertainty. Most people are afraid of those words. Uncertainty, manipulation, I love those words. Those are not bad words by themselves, right? It's the end result in the application of why you're using that. Our education system is currently fixed on the 2 + 2 = 4 syndrome. Everything needs to be mapped out. We need to be exact about things, and we're afraid of uncertainty. Think of what happened with the pioneers, right? You know, the covered wagons, you know, the westward ho kind of thing, right? All of the uncertainty of, you know, the scary part of not knowing whether or not they were going to be alive when they reached their goal. Art enhances curiosity, and curiosity nurtures pioneering. Uncertainty opens up possibilities, forces you to improvise, it breaks routine, and encourages risk-taking, and it sparks curiosity. Okay? One of our goals in life should be to help make others whole, and we're all a piece of that solution. Now, I'm not going to share this, but all I'm going to say about this is that my dad used to pick up all of these individuals that were scared, they were hungry, they were tired, that crossed the border, undocumented. And I would get home and I would encounter all these people I didn't know, and I would ask my mom, who are these guys? And my mom would say, pues, ya conoces a tu padre. Translation, you know your dad. Which meant that my dad did it again. He picked up some individuals, brought them home, gave them an opportunity to eat, take a shower, take a nap, and in the afternoon or evening, he would bring out his accordion, his guitar, and a whole bunch of alcohol. And he would play this god-awful music for these guys. But they couldn't complain because it was free. And in the morning, they would give him breakfast. He would put him in the back of his truck, and he would give them a ride 20, 30 miles up the road. Not because they wanted to come out in the front newspaper, the front page of the newspaper, or to make money. You know why they did it? They did it because it was the right thing to do, and what's missing, of course, is the empathy, sympathy, and love for everyone, whether we think they deserve it or not. That is a requirement, guys. So, I'm going to leave it there. Any questions at this point that you have? I know this is a lot of information, but I wanted to be thorough. No questions? Comments? Money you want to give? I take Zelle. Yes, Dr. Alfaro.
Maybe you could share with us what we're going to be doing this afternoon.
Okay, so some of this could be seen as theoretical, and what I do in the workshop is we're going to be doing a couple of projects because in an hour it probably is not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to do more than 2 projects, but I'm going to give you the physical account to some of this stuff that I've been talking about. So we're going to be doing a self-portrait and probably a family portrait as well. I think those are fun and interesting, but also it's going to show you lessons learned, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other projects as well. There's a book in the back called Cultivate a Creative Mind that came out about 3-4 years ago. That's a good book to have, not only in your house, but also in your classroom, that I think has some very basic, but very insightful and interesting and fun projects that you can do with your students and yourself. Anybody? Anybody else? No takers. Wow. You know, I always tell people that one of the things that I've seen around the country at colleges and universities is that students are really good at taking notes, but one of the things that's happened in the last decade or so is that people are terrified to engage in conversation and ask questions. And that worries me. Because if you guys were a class of kindergartners, not only would you have both arms raised, but also both legs. You know it's true. All right. Anybody else? Yes, thank you.
What advice do you have for disrupting the system? I've worked in a school that's very high achieving and driven on, caring for the kids to go to college, and they really bought into this whole, what we do is really broken the system. How do you encourage us or advise to disrupt the system and after changing this?
Oh gosh. I don't think we have enough time. That's like a whole conference in itself, I think. What advice would I give? My wife keeps challenging me. She keeps calling me Mr. Smarty Pants. She thinks that, she says, you think you know it all. No, I don't know it all. All right, well, what would you do? I think that, kids now are exposed to so much that whatever we bring into the classroom or into our houses needs to be over the top. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I do want to give you this information because this is one of my brilliant ideas that I have. I buy a dozen eggs, different colors, and then I would spend my own hard work money. I would order a big, huge ostrich egg and just set it on my desk for the kids, and my kids and for myself to salivate over and wonder what it would be like to break that thing in half, and just kind of create this beautiful, shocking moment that is going to be remembered for the rest of their lives. I think that in terms of the disruption, I think bringing something, I read the book Multiple Intelligences by Howard Gardner. Somebody said, hey, you need to read this book, and I did, and I asked my wife, were you required to read this book? And she said, yes. And I said, what did you think of it? And she said, I thought it was okay. I said, what? Thought it was okay? Are you kidding me? She said, well, what did you think? And I said, I thought it was phenomenal because I kept pushing it in many different directions in my mind, specifically wondering how it would have affected me if my first grade teacher would have said, hey, Simone, hey, Richard, hey, whatever, all of you are, you have different gifts, and all of you guys are incredibly intelligent, and, you're in school to kind of, further advance that and nurture all of these abilities. And her answer and a couple of superintendents from the Valley answered the comment exactly the same way, which was, Simone, we don't have time for that. Teachers don't have 15, what did it take me, 15, 30 seconds to say that? Well, the superintendent said, well, you're not going to change all of the students. And I said, who's saying I'm going to change all of the students? There's still a lot of Latinos that are dropping out. We want to use anything within our power to encourage them to stay. Because that student that's walking away could be walking away with a cure for cancer, guys, or something even more serious. The fatality of humanity, right? And we've got to be very careful. Not sure if that answers your question, but that's a really deep, interesting question. Anybody else? Yes?
I don't have a question, but I feel like you would be an advocate for not grading fine arts or the skilled arts. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. And that's a difficult concept for people who've already bought into the idea that because art is not a core subject and your humble check is not dependent on that, it's difficult to create a new habit in our minds. It took my wife probably about 12 or 14 years to finally get it, and I promised her, bless you, I promised her that her life was, and her life and her work as a teacher was going to be much less complicated and easier if she took my advice and, asked her. Yeah. But you know what happened? You know that image that I had up here with the kid, the one that I said didn't pay attention to the teacher? You know what happened when I asked my wife to ask the teacher if I could meet the child and look at more of his artwork? I seriously wanted to look at his art. But of course, I came across, I guess, like a creepy old guy who would meet this kid. So the teacher said, no, the parents aren't interested. Well, my wife substituted for a teacher at the same school and said, hey, by the way, my husband is still using that drawing of your kid, the kindergarten kid. You know what her response was? You would think, right? Well, who's your husband? Why is he still using it, right? Her response was that she rolled her eyes. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think it goes back to the fact that because the arts are not a core subject and you're not going to be graded on that necessarily, right? So I think that's really part of the obstacle there for most teachers. Or most parents and teachers, yes.
Since your wife's a teacher and you've traveled a lot, do you notice that schools and districts are moving towards more art or less art? Because I'm in San Diego Unified and we're emphasizing STEAM. Yeah. And I'm the science rep at my site, so I've gone to all these trainings, but they're trying to remind us to use art in the classroom, but there's only a small percentage of us hearing that conversation. So what trends do you see happening? Okay,
well, I think there's two things.
Yeah.
There's Prop 28. You guys have heard of Prop 28, right? Actually, I'm coming back to Calexico next month to do some work here around the schools through Prop 28. Prop 28 is teaching art for art's sake. Okay? Art for art's sake is not going to change much. I would say it's going to change very little. Okay? The kid can do that on his own. The person can do that on their own. Okay? Art for education's sake is a whole other thing. Okay? So that's the problem, is that the education system isn't asking the right questions. It's not about art for art's sake, because even when they decided to put the A in STEM and do the STEAM thing, which is kind of stupid in my mind, right? It was kind of like an afterthought, and I think art, again, is always an afterthought, and it should not be an afterthought. It's going to have to be in the forefront, along with everything else. The reason why I'm saying this is because we've got to think in multiple directions at the same time. And it's highly likely that a lot of the stuff that's being taught under the umbrella of STEAM, a lot of that stuff has the possibility that it's already outdated, but a lot of people in education don't even know it. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, with artificial intelligence, with superintelligence, and quantum intelligence, things are going to move rapidly. And I think they've already moved beyond us, but we're not even knowing of that already. And so a lot of that coding, a lot of the stuff that is being taught under the umbrella of STEAM, it could possibly be outdated already, but they're not aware of it because they don't know enough about, the artificial intelligence and everything that's coming behind it. So when I ask the question, what is the thing that we can definitely nurture that is going to keep our children in the game today, tomorrow, to the future? Well, it's all about creativity and being able to think creatively at any moment, right? So I think that has, for me, that has a lot more value in the end goal than something that is, oh, well, my kid knows how to do coding. So what? There's a whole bunch of people. And the other thing, too, is that we need to also understand that we're not the only country in the world that is doing it right and doing it better than us. And so we need to look at those countries and say, let's steal the best that they have, and we're not doing that effectively enough, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, I think that people are being fooled by thinking that Prop 28 and teaching art for art's sake is going to save education. It is not. It's not going to work. It's not. And we can have a whole discussion on that, and once we do the workshop, we can actually talk a little bit more about that. But thank you for that question. Yes.
I teach 4 and 5-year-olds, and I'm interested in your thoughts on collaborative art projects for that age. Obviously, individual art projects are important for creativity, but how do you feel about art as a form of teaching collaborative social skills?
I hate it.
Okay.
I absolutely hate it. I think that I see the point, but I think that for 4 and 5-year-olds, I do not show any of my artwork to kids below 3rd grade. Remember that program that existed called, what was it called? The kids were learning how to do Van Gogh and Cezanne and stuff like that.
Arts Attack.
What was it?
Arts Attack.
And there was a name to it. Meet the Masters. That's what it was called. Meet the Masters. It's been around for a while. It's still around, by the way. But I did a keynote in Chicago, in Illinois, just out of Chicago, and they asked me what I thought about, Meet the Masters, because they had spent, that thing made millions and millions and millions of dollars. Right? And the way it worked was that they brought in this program, this cookie cutter program, where the kids would learn how to dress up like they're artists, and they would learn how to paint like Van Gogh and stuff like that. And I said, well, I think you just wasted a whole bunch of time and you eroded a lot of the creativity of the kids. And they wanted to beat me up. No, seriously. They wanted to beat me up. The people, I did a keynote for the California Association of Art Teachers in Sacramento. Those guys wanted to beat me up. And so I said, well, look, let me explain what I'm talking about here. Let's say you're a 1st grader or 2nd grader. The teacher comes in with this program and says, all of this creative genius stuff that you're already doing, like I showed you, that doesn't matter. You need to be doing Van Gogh. You need to be doing Cezanne, right? I don't know about you guys, but that's like verbal abuse to the 10th power. Meaning like whatever you're able to do, this stuff that I'm calling genius, doesn't matter. So I think that we should be very careful, and I think that we need to just protect and nurture what's already organically there. They don't need any instruction, guys. Just continue to get a piece of paper. Now the materials is a whole other ball of wax. I think that definitely exploring the exploration of materials is definitely a good thing, because even at the college level, they don't really do that a lot, or effectively enough. Yeah. But I would say stay away from that, at least for a while. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so I am a budding artist. I've been doing art before, or been able to hold something. But I'm currently learning a new medium, watercolor. And do you think that, like, learning, the college classes and stuff like that, learning color theory and everything else, takes away that creativity? Or do you think it's something that enhances or grows, helps you grow as an artist?
That's a really good question. There was a drawing that my wife gave me. A little girl did a drawing of a elephant, and it had a trunk, and with the trunk you could see that it was snorting in all the water, whatever the elephants do with their nose in the trunk. And it's just a simple pencil drawing. And I ended up, I'm not going to be able to show you, but I ended up looking at that, and I thought, wow, I've been bamboozled by the education system, right? By the art classes that I took at this professional college. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when I saw that drawing by the little girl, I realized that most of us experience this thing that we call reality in the superficial aspects, right? And so when I saw this little girl's drawing, it reminded me that I had every authority and every right to be able to draw something. Like if I did a drawing here, if I did a drawing here, like this, this is it. So I looked at this and I thought, wow, this is brilliant. Thank you, by the way. Art can provide us with new ways of looking at these things. And so if you feel like you can't learn something from your 4 or 5-year-old or your kindergartner, you're absolutely wrong, right? Because I looked at this and I thought, yeah, this is absolutely true, right? What I need to do is I need to use this idea. I don't know why my clicker's not using it. And so I ended up using it on Mr. Rogers. Where is it at? Yeah. Oh, this thing is not working right. One more time, okay. And so that's where I took this kid's idea and I applied it to Mr. Rogers. This is a piece I did many years ago. The translucency, because a lot of times, again, we look at superficiality and we experience life through the superficial aspects of life. And so to be able to create that third dimension is wonderful, right? That kind of gives you that practice and the habit to be able to see things beyond just the superficiality of things, which is what we're currently addicted to. And so children still have that magic of being able to see things in a 3-dimensional format. A lot of us can't do that anymore. So that's good. But getting back to your question about learning different mediums and how that kind of changes the dynamic of how we think, I don't think it's really learning the dynamics of the mediums. I think it's really more about how we view things, the exploration and the experiences. It goes back to that, at least in mine. Yeah, that's a good question. All right, I think we're out of time. But thank you for your questions. They were very engaging, and I look forward to working with you guys in the workshop and kind of exploring some of these ideas even more. So thank you again for being here.